It's 2 in the afternoon on Monday, November 10th here in Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung, and these are the stories making headlines at this hour. Korea and China conclude 30 months of bilateral free trade talks. The leaders of the two nations are set to attend the official signing ceremony. A North Korea expert in Seoul says the Kim Jong-un regime is afraid of being brought to The Hague for human rights violations, and that's one of the reasons for the release of 2 American detainees over the weekend. And U.S. President Barack Obama says his decision to double the current number of American troops in Iraq signals a quote-unquote new phase against Islamic State militants. And it's a wrap officially. President Park Geun-hye and Chinese President Xi Jinping announced the conclusion of bilateral free trade talks. With only some administrative and legal fine-tuning left, the two sides hope the deal goes into effect sometime in the middle of next year. Choi Yoo-sun has our top story.
Korea and China began talks on a bilateral free trade agreement back in May of 2012. After a tug-of-war that lasted 30 months and strong opposition from Korea's farming community, the two countries' leaders, meeting on the sidelines of the APEC summit in Beijing, declared the conclusion of their FTA talks on Monday. Seoul and Beijing have announced they will remove tariffs on more than 90% of their previously agreed products over the next 20 years. And rice, a super-sensitive product for Korean farmers, has been excluded altogether.
We have agreed to completely exclude rice from the Korea-China FTA, and it will not be subject to the deal in any way. Also, the liberalization of agricultural products is at Korea's lowest, 70% in terms of products and 40% in terms of the import price.
More than 600 agricultural and livestock products have also been exempt from tariff concessions. China's stringent customs clearance has been eased for Korean firms, and a great deal of the Chinese service sector will be opened up to Korean investors. Korea's presidential office says Korean businesses will benefit from the largest ever tariff reduction from the current $5.4 billion they pay each year.
We expect to accelerate entry into China's consumer goods and domestic markets. Instead of Korean conglomerates, who have already globalized, we helped open the Chinese market for Korea's small and mid-sized businesses and the agro-fisheries industries.
With its 13th bilateral FTA, Korea has secured free trade with the world's major economies, such as the U.S., the EU, ASEAN, and China, further bolstering its global trade network. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News, Beijing.
And Korea's GDP is expected to grow as much as 1.25% 5 years after the Korea-China Free Trade Agreement goes into effect. Now that's according to Seoul-based Uri Investment and Securities, which says the FTA will revive Korea's slumping exports to China. It says if customs tariffs are cut by 50% over all products, Korea's GDP will increase by 1.1%. In that case, production in Korea's agriculture and fisheries sectors will fall by roughly 0.85%, while production in the manufacturing and service sectors will jump. Now, Uri also expects Korea's auto industry to benefit from the trade pact due to increased car sales to China, but the textile industry will likely suffer as China holds a strong competitive edge thanks to its low labor costs. And moving back to the APEC summit currently held in Beijing, analysts say China, as the host nation, will be using the opportunity to promote itself as a regional power, both on the economic and diplomatic fronts. Our Kim Jong-gil looks into how Beijing might be keeping another superpower, the U.S., in check.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has laid out his vision to lead the Asia-Pacific region, both economically and diplomatically. At the top of Beijing's agenda for this week's APEC summit is the Free Trade Area of the Asia-Pacific, or FTAAP. is part of China's vision to consolidate and simplify the numerous free trade agreements within the region. China hopes to use this week's APEC summit as a venue to study and discuss the costs and benefits of the FTA, and would like to see it mentioned in the final draft of the summit's communique. Some Chinese experts view the FTA as a strategic move to counter the US-led 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, which excludes China. Washington has made implementation of the TPP a priority in expanding trade in the region. On top of the FTA, China will also be pushing its vision to set up the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which has been likened to China's version of the International Monetary Fund. The AIIB, to be established by the end of next year, will help finance infrastructure development in the Asia-Pacific region with an authorized capital of $100 billion. On the diplomatic side, President Xi Jinping began holding summit talks with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Monday. Ties between the two countries have soured in recent months over historical and territorial disputes. But Beijing's relations with Moscow appear to be moving in an opposite direction, as the two grow closer, especially economically, with plans to co-develop natural gas projects worth some $400 billion. China's moves over the course of the coming days are being seen as an attempt to promote its economic and diplomatic rise and its role as a counterbalance to the United States. Kim Jong-un, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through.
Now, ever since North Korea's release of 2 American detainees over the weekend, the question of why has been on people's minds. ARIRANG's Kim spoke to experts in Seoul for their thoughts about Pyongyang's true intentions.
North Korea's surprise release of 2 American detainees is raising questions about Pyongyang's intentions. Some experts believe North Korean leader Kim Jong-un made the move over concerns he and others in his regime will be referred to The Hague for human rights violations.
North Korea is obviously pretty worried about the United Nations referring it to the International Criminal Court. You know, that would be a big loss of faith for the regime in front of its citizens.
Analysts say Pyongyang's move is also an attempt to make Beijing nervous.
Under Kim Jong-un's rule, China-North Korea relations have been frosty. If Pyongyang and Washington start talking, it will pressure Beijing to hold high-level talks with North Korea.
Although China remains North Korea's strongest ally, bilateral relations have turned cold under the Xi Jinping administration, due in part to the North's nuclear threat. But despite U.S. intelligence chief James Clapper's visit to the North, Washington has made clear that it will not hold talks with Pyongyang unless it first shows sincerity about halting its nuclear program. And then there is a question about what Clapper's trip means for North-South relations.
When the relationship with the United States gets better, the relationship with South Korea gets worse, and vice versa. It's all part of Pyongyang's strategy to divide and conquer, so to speak.
While experts say North Korea's release of its 2 detainees will have a positive impact on relations with Washington, they don't think it'll mean the same for ties with Seoul. Kim, ARIRANG News.
In other international news, this past Sunday marked the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. German Chancellor Angela Merkel says the fall showed the world that dreams can come true, but a former leader of the Soviet Union has warned against another Cold War. Son Jung-in reports.
A light installation was set to commemorate the 25th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall on Sunday. 8,000 illuminated balloons containing personal messages were released along a 15-kilometer stretch of the former border to signify the dissolution of not only the wall, but of the symbolic division between East and West. German Chancellor Angela Merkel led the celebrations attended by tens of thousands of people and honored those who helped bring down the wall, describing its fall as an example of the human desire for freedom. However, the day also served as a reminder that the scars of history remain in the people's hearts. Speaking at a separate event in Berlin, former leader of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, who is credited for his role in reuniting Berlin in 1989, warned that tensions between the U.S. and Russia over Ukraine could plunge the world into a new Cold War.
The world is on the brink of a new Cold War. Some say that it has already begun. And yet, while the situation is dramatic, we do not see the main international body, the UN Security Council, playing any role or taking any concrete action.
Renewed clashes between government forces and Russian-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine over the weekend are raising concerns that tensions between the West and Russia will escalate even further. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
U.S. President Barack Obama is shifting to what he calls a new phase in the battle against the Islamic State. The number of American military advisors dispatched to Iraq will be doubled as the fight transitions to one that is more offensive than defensive in nature. Connie Lee has the details.
U.S. President Barack Obama is calling it a new phase in the fight against Islamic State. In an interview with CBS News, the president said the decision to send 1,500 more U.S. troops into Iraq, or nearly double the current number, shows the U.S. is in a position to start going on some offense, rather than just trying to halt the momentum of the Islamic State, or IS. President Obama reiterated that the troops will not be engaged in combat operations, but provide additional training for Iraqi soldiers and militia fighters on the ground. It may be helping. Recent video from Iraq's defense ministry shows its army recapturing 3 villages from IS militants west of Baghdad.
Troops of the 17th Infantry Division, 60th Brigade, backed by air support from Army Aviation, destroyed hideouts of Daesh in Al Refuge area. You have seen the bodies, and victory was achieved.
Meanwhile, U.S. officials have not yet confirmed reports that the leader of IS, Abu Bakr Baghdadi, was injured during an airstrike on Friday that hit a gathering of militant leaders in the northern Iraqi town of Mosul. With IS militants already having seized large areas in Iraq and Syria, President Obama is asking Congress for $5.6 billion for operations to stop their progress. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
More than 2 million citizens in Spain's wealthy region of Catalonia went to the polls Sunday to vote on whether it should be a state independent from Spain. The move comes in defiance of an earlier order by the country's constitutional court to suspend what it called an unconstitutional referendum. Now, with 88% of the votes counted, the Catalan government said 1.6 million of its 7.5 million people had voted for forming a new nation. Nationalism has been brewing in Catalonia and its capital of Barcelona as the region contributes more to the Spanish economy than it gets back in government funds. And for this week's Industry Insight, we take a look at the steel industry. It is, after all, one of Korea's major export items, with outbound shipments accounting for more than half of the country's GDP. But it's no longer news that the country's leading steel maker, Posco, is losing ground in the global market. And our Hwang Ji-hye tells us how Posco is weathering the storm.
In the late 90s, Posco was the #1 company in the global steel market in terms of productivity. But that was a long time ago. Today, it's the world's 6th largest steel maker, with Chinese mills quickly making up ground, or in some cases, even moving past Posco. Is it a sign of things to come? Take a look. China's steel exports are as strong now as they've ever been, hitting a record high in September. This has a lot to do with Chinese steelmakers looking to the global market with a slowdown in the domestic economy, but their low prices are also enticing global clients. This is bad news for Korea's largest steelmaker, Posco.
Chinese competitors are starting to export to markets that Posco does, which means more competition and slumping steel prices.
Given the market conditions, then, it should come as no surprise that Posco's sales and profits have been on the slide for the past 3 years. Adapting to the new landscape, Posco, which has nearly 50 affiliates, is offloading its non-steel units like department stores. But analysts say such a strategy cannot be a cure-all for Posco.
Posco should expand its marketing network and strategic alliances with its customers to innovate its steel products by cooperating with its customers.
In fact, the Korean steelmaker is already doing that, calling it strategy solution marketing. Posco has pledged to contribute to the development of its customers by introducing products that cater specifically to their needs. For example, by teaming up with French automaker Renault, Posco developed high-strength but lightweight steel products for Renault's new hybrid car, leveling the playing field against cheap but lower quality steel from China. 황지혜, 아리랑 뉴스.
The Korea Exchange says the benchmark Kospi has performed worse this year than any of the other 15 major markets around the world. Korea's main bourse is down 3.5% compared to the beginning of the year. Now, that's the lowest level among bourses that each account for more than 1% of the world's market cap. The only other stock markets with negative growth were Germany's DAX, Britain's FTSE 100, and France's CAC 40, all in the minus 2% range. India's Sensex soared 32%, followed by the Shanghai Composite Index and the S&P 500. Now, there may be a couple of reasons why foreign investors are selling shares of Hyundai Motor, one of them most likely being the firm's recent decision to spend billions on a plot of land in Seoul. Kim Ji-yeon has more.
Foreign investors are increasingly selling their shares in Hyundai Motor on worries that Korea's largest automaker is not focusing on profitability at a time it is losing its price competitiveness against its Japanese rivals. Data from the Korea Exchange shows foreign investors' holdings in Hyundai Motor dropped to 44.4% in November, its lowest point in 4 months. The foreign flight has been apparent since September, when the company bought a plot of land in downtown Seoul for 3 times its appraised value. During the 1.5-month period, foreigners sold nearly $460 million worth of Hyundai shares, causing the market value of the company to slump 20% to just over $31.4 billion. Apart from Hyundai's controversial land buy, what really had foreign investors running for the hills was the automaker's falling earnings performance during the April to September period. Operating profits plunged more than 15% from the same period last year to $3.4 billion. Watchers say Hyundai Motor is struggling to compete against Japanese automakers, which have been buoyed by Tokyo's expansionary monetary policies that have weakened the yen. The Japanese currency dropped by more than 5% against the greenback since the Bank of Japan announced an additional monetary easing policy at the end of October. During the April to September period, operating profits for Japan's largest automaker, Toyota, jumped nearly 8% to $11.8 billion. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
And shifting gears, with the spread of social networking services online, companies now have many more options for advertising. Gone are the days of TV or newspaper ads. Now, YouTube marketing is where it's at. Our Kim Min-ji reports on why analysts think this one particular method could be more effective and engaging.
Viral frenzy. Korea's distribution industry is taking its marketing campaigns online, and they're getting funnier and more sensational. This video featuring a fashion brand's fall and winter collection got 1.9 million views in just the first 2 weeks after going on YouTube.
YouTube marketing allows us to better deliver the story and concept of our brand. We can also check out instantly who is interested in our products, and the popularity of the ad leads to increased sales.
Paldo, a local food and beverage company, saw sales of its traditional rice drink Sikhae jump 35% after the release of an online ad, which it says allowed them to reach a larger consumer base. In some cases, it's not just about sales and numbers. This campaign of an online shopping mall for one looks to rebuild its image with a thank you message to postal workers.
Some people have a negative view about shopping advertisements, saying that it promotes spending. However, we actually see it as a way of linking people. We wanted to show our philosophy through the ad.
YouTube and other popular internet sites have become a favored marketing tool among companies. Unlike conventional TV ads, online advertisements are relatively cheap, can offer context, a sense of immediacy, and personalization all at once.
Industry watchers say although it costs less to produce these advertisements, the positive effects can be greater as the company gets its message out to a wider audience, especially if it goes viral. And the craze has boosted growth in the online ad market, particularly the mobile sector. Last year, the mobile advertisement market was valued at nearly $400 million, more than a five-fold increase from 2011. That makes up about 4% of the total domestic ad market. And with the exponential growth in the use of smart mobile devices, watchers say it's a market that is sure to get bigger. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
For today's Arts and Culture segment, we are going to talk about one film festival that is solely dedicated to Korean movies. Our Geun-hye joins us for that. Good afternoon, Geun-hye.
Good afternoon. You're absolutely right. So the London Korean Film Festival has been steadily growing for almost a decade now. And now this year we saw the release of some Korean movies that made quite the presence on the global front, and they've been included in this festival, resulting in the biggest ever. So take a look.
The annual London Korean Film Festival has finally gotten started, with quite the lineup set for this year. Over 50 screenings of contemporary Korean films are set to show at one of the largest Korean movie film festivals outside the peninsula, attracting quite the global audience.
I think the characters and the plot are really interesting, and it's really different to English movies. I really like the storyline and the characters, and I like how it's made as well.
This is the 9th edition of the festival, and the biggest one yet. The London Korean Film Festival includes everything from action movies and thrillers to romance, also boasting some of this year's biggest Korean films as part of the program as well. Most notably, the festival opened with the hit film Gundo, Age of the Rampant, starring actor Kang Dong-won, who made an appearance for the screening.
I think it's great that there is an opportunity for the fans to meet the actors and the actors to meet the fans on the front lines.
The festival is based in the Odeon West End, a landmark in the London cinema community, but will make its round throughout the country, continuing screenings of a diverse range of Korean films.
Already several films have been quite successful. I would guess that In Context's new film, which closes this festival, is a film like that.
Award-winning director Im Kwon-taek's drama Revive is set to round out this year's edition of the London Korean Film Festival.
So it's not the first year that I'm hearing about this London Korea Film Festival. So
Right.
you said it's almost a decade old.
Right, so next year marks the 10th year anniversary, and even though this year was the 9th, they're already making plans for next year. So they did say that this year was the biggest ever, and they really did make a push for that because they believe that at the 10-year mark, if they really establish a good film festival, it'll be there for the future of the film festival as well. Kind of tongue twister there. But really, they're really excited about this festival, and they really want to make it one of the major Korean film festivals around the world.
And forgive my ignorance, are there any other film festivals that are solely dedicated to Korean movies overseas?
So there's actually another fun one that takes place in Brussels now. This Film Festival Brussels is another one that's only been around for about 2 years. However, they do have big plans for that as well, and it's only been possible by film festivals like the London Korean Film Festival. So this particular festival really paved the way for other festivals around the world.
Okay, all right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left for today. Thank you very much, Geun-hye, for today's story.
You're very welcome.
A high-pressure front has been providing lots of sunshine since early this morning, and it should remain sunny all day long across the nation. And if you have noticed, this feels much nicer this afternoon. Daytime highs are hovering in the mid to upper teens, so let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the daytime high in the capital will top out at 16, while Daegu and Gwangju rise to 18 and 17, and Busan will climb into 19 this afternoon. And on to other regions. Jeju Island and Daejeon will be getting up to 16 and 17 respectively, while Dokdo sees a high of 14. Well, this week will be a transition period from autumn to winter, and Thursday, on the day of the college entrance exam here in Korea, should be the coldest of the week. The low will drop to the freezing mark, and daytime highs will only get up to 9. So for those who are taking a test on that day, bundle up tight. Well, that's all from me today, and back to you, Hyun-kyung, in the studio.
All right, thank you, Ji-hyun, for the updates. That brings us to the end of our newscast. We'll be back with more updates at 4 p.m. Korea time.